My name is Phoebe Schenker, and I'm the executive director of the Reuse Alliance. We're a nonprofit based in Northern California, and our mission is to advocate for and support reuse in our community. Uh, Similar mission to most of yours, I think. I always like to say that our secret mission, though, is to spread the joy of reuse. And I guess the goal of this session is to talk about how we can have the joy of reuse and policy all in one session. So um, that is what we're going to be aiming for today. Um, I thought I would do a little bit of framing. So feel free to drop in. I'm stealing this from the previous session, but what kind of emoji comes to mind when you think about policy? This is my version of an emoji. Who remembers? I'm just a bill. So I think a lot of people think about policy as legislation um, or laws of some kind, right? So I pulled up this definition of policy just to kind of change the way people are thinking about it a little bit. So policy is really just a plan or a set of ideas that we agree on as a group of people or even as an individual. I love that, thinking about your own personal reuse policies. Uh, or a kind of system of guidelines. So I think certainly legislation is one piece of that. Rules, laws can help to govern to make those guidelines very concrete. But we can also think about lots of other ways that we can set and establish guidelines. So for me, I like to break things down into threes. Although I loved learning in that graphic session that I could actually have up to seven categories. So I'm gonna maybe expand in the future. Um, but I think, so thinking about policies and the ways that we convey our priorities, um, you know, we focus on, the positive impacts of reuse. So I like the incentive side, thinking about ways to highlight reuse policies, award things, procurement policies, permit streamlining. There's lots of ways to incentivize reuse. Of course, there are penalties that we can impose as well, and those can be both formal and informal and grassroots. And then I think a really important one to lean into is education and awareness building. So how do we just make clear what reuse is, why it's important, why as a group we would want to be supporting it. Um, so that's the first thing. What types of policies are we talking about? And then I think the next thing is to think about at what levels, right? So this is where my 2 p.m. brain starts to glaze over a little bit, but there's lots of different ways of thinking about policy. We're all operating in in international global policy. There's federal policy. There are things that you can do at that level, and there are things that are better done at the state level. And then I think for a lot of us, really leaning into the local policy level. So, what are we doing to highlight reuse at the local level? And then just the last thing, I think the title of this session, which I love, is a little bit sort of why would you all, as practitioners of reuse, care about the policy side? And this is the way I like to think about it. We're all working to create a cultural change towards reuse and to move people up this ladder from reuse. What is that? To I know what it is, I know how to do it, and I'm able to do it. And so I think policy really comes in at the, what is reuse? How do we highlight that as a priority in our governments and organizations? Um, and then, am I able to do it? Is there the infrastructure? Are there the incentives and the economic, um, incentives, both economic and the infrastructure to be able to practice it? So with that's my little framing of policy and how we might think about it. Today we're going to have two examples, and then I'm hoping we're going to have some time for question and answer afterwards. And then we are going to have a actual breakout session following this session to really be able to dive deeper into talking about specific policies and what you might be grappling with in your community. So with that, I'm joined by two amazing presenters today. First, we're going to be hearing from Ben from Hennepin County, and then we will have is it Estee? I'm going to let her introduce herself.
Yes,
Estee. Okay, excellent. From Oregon Metro. So excited to hear county and city perspectives on this. And with that, I will stop sharing and let Ben share his presentation instead.
All right. Thank you, Phoebe.
And just one thing I forgot to say is if you guys have questions as things are going along, please put them in the chat, and we will be collecting those and answering them at the end of both presentations.
All right. Maybe I got to do a switcheroo here, though. I'll just swap this around here so you can. How's that look, Phoebe? Got a thumbs up? All right. Very good. Yeah. Hi, everyone. My name is Ben Knudson. I work for the Hennepin County Environment and Energy Department, and excited to be here to share a little bit. I'm gonna start at the top by kind of covering the state landscape, then transition to plans. Talk a lot about plans, but that really paves the way for policy. Then talk about our programs, and then kind of like a boomerang back to the state. So Minnesota might be a little unique in that it gives a lot of responsibilities to counties to manage solid waste. And enshrined in state statute is our waste management hierarchy that we refer to a lot. And I know we're all familiar with this. You know, it's like my kid learned this in grade school, the 3 R's all the way down. I mean, it's a little more complex, some wrinkles in there, but we have reduce, reuse, recycle, organics recycling. We even have a new food and food surplus and food scraps hierarchy as well. And you might think, oh, why does this really matter? But so many things come back to this hierarchy. So it's really important. It's the driving force. And then the other framework that's important for Minnesota is that also according to the state statute, there's a separate category for the metropolitan area. So that's a 7-county area. Oh, and I should have said Hennepin County is Minneapolis and 44 other cities. So to kind of orient you there. And Hennepin County is 1.3 million people. And so every 6 years, the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency has to create a metropolitan solid waste management policy plan. We just call it the policy plan. So what it looked like most recently is the state had 75 strategies. Certain strategies are required. Others have a point value. They're optional, but we have to make it to 75 points. And the state creates this policy plan, and then we, the metro counties, have to implement the policy plan. And the reason why this structure is important is because, yes, it requires certain things, but others that are optional, you get to choose your own adventure there a little bit. And I'll talk about why that's important in a little bit. So the next step is, all right, state wraps up their lengthy policy plan. It's like, okay, counties, it's time for you to actually talk about implementation. How are you going to do it? And so on the right there, you see the table of contents for our solid waste management plan. There's a lot in there. There's so many different strategies. I put a little red circle around reuse strategies, which are, they're oriented close to the top, right under waste reduction. So it's nice. It's nice to see that ordering too. And then it's like, okay, what are we being required to do, or what's optional? So I took a few examples from the state's policy plan. It's like, you should provide grants for reuse. That was a required one. You should do green meetings. You should participate in a network, such as Reuse Minnesota. You should provide fix-it clinics. You should, the last two are optional there. You should create a reuse location. People can drop in to do all sorts of things related to reuse. Or alternatively, you should have a curbside set out day specifically for reuse. We see that sometimes with cleanup events where maybe you're just getting rid of, trashing certain items or recycling them, but this is again specific to reuse. And so the reason why having a mix of optional and required is nice is because counties are, so with 7 metro counties, we're all in different different locations politically, and so some want to go faster and further, and others are a little reluctant to get too far ahead though. So I know I talked about the state's policy plan, the county's solid waste management plan. I don't want to frame this as something that the state is solely responsible for pushing forward when it comes to reuse. Counties on their own play a huge role, and Hennepin County has been lucky enough, or I'd say our team has been lucky enough to be supported by a board that's very interested in making progress. And so, yeah, and bear with me, I'm showing you more plans, but this is important because this is in addition to what the state is telling us to do. So this is voluntary action by the county, and that was motivated in part by the development of our climate action plan in 2021. And this had a materials management section, which, maybe that's a corollary is sustainable materials management. And it really listed some of the most important strategies for us there, and with the expectation that we're making progress. It's not just a plan on the shelf. Then on the heels of that, it's like, all right, got a climate action plan, some good zero waste strategies in there, but our board wanted to move forward and actually create a zero waste plan. And why that was important is we looked very far into the future. This is like 2040 or beyond. And I think that's a really important exercise, because if you're too stuck in the here and now, 1-year plan, 2-year plan, whatever, you maybe lack some of that vision that's really important. Like, where do we want to be? How can we transform the system? And so that really made us look a long ways down the road with that zero waste plan. Then, and I would like to say too, this is not normal. Like, we're going through a pretty intense time period right now of planning and implementation. So then we took that zero waste plan, so many actions in there, and we whittled it down like 12 priority items in our plan to reinvent the solid waste system. And so I think that's kind of the most up-to-date version of where we are now. Like, we've been in implementation, but it's kind of, all right, we're done with this planning process, and we have our path charted, and we can start to dig in to implementation more. And we identify, this is simplification, of course, but you got policy, you got programs, you got infrastructure, and they all relate to each other in a major way. They support one another. In the past, we've had a lot of programs. That's kind of how you start, but the policy really makes a difference too. So it's like, well, you're probably like, all right, Ben, that's a lot of plans. Like, what's actually happening? What's going on? What's tangible? So we do have, I listed a few of our reuse programs here, and I can't stress enough that this really was connected to the policy process. And I consider a plan a policy, really. It's an endorsement of what we want to do. And our plans are followed up with budgets. They're followed up with staffing, and followed up with a lot of the tools that we need for implementation. So our Choose to Reuse program, that's not new. That goes way back. We've been doing that for so long. It originated where we would connect with a lot of different organizations and create coupon books. And that would really drive people to these reuse retailers. We also started with business recycling grants. And that transitioned to solely business waste prevention grants. And so it's solely dedicated to reduce and reuse. And so it's great to see that shift, that focus, and it's really brought out like different types of grant applicants. We also have our fix-it clinics, or I guess some people call them repair cafes. We host monthly fix-it clinics. First ones in Minnesota to get those implemented. And now we've even added fix-it hubs. We have two of those. What we call hubs is just, we have two hubs and they have regular hours, regular locations. So it's a little more predictable. And then we have our minimize program, kind of a play on words for MN there, Minnesota. And we work with the Minnesota Chamber of Commerce to provide rebates to businesses that replace single-use items with reusable ones. And then kind of a nod to what Phoebe said about education, we have our Zero Waste Challenge program where we work, well, it can be specific like plastic free challenge or stop food waste challenge, but really walking people, residents through their individual journey, how they can do better. Oh, one little sports thing for you. You can see our commitment to fix-it clinics because we even fixed this guy's Oklahoma City basketball jersey, even though he's in Minnesota. Go Wolves! So committed to reuse for sure here. Then with the last two things I wanted to highlight, wanted to go back to the state really. So I think it's kind of like Hennepin starts doing more, then other counties see like, oh, what Hennepin did was successful. We can do that too. It's not the bleeding edge, it's the predictable edge. And then the state starts offering grants that are maybe not just traditional recycling, but grants moving up the hierarchy as well. And so we were actually the recipient of two of those grants, one for Swap It events, where working with Reuse Minnesota on that. And that's what you're seeing on the photo on the left there. That was a recent swap event for kitchen gadgets at Ridgedale Library. And the number of people in there was just astounding. It was amazing. Another grant we got from the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency was for building circularity, and that's more in the realm of deconstruction. And I guess I didn't go into all our different deconstruction reuse programs, but we've got a lot of good things going on there, and that's just keeping it going, and really with an eye on developing the businesses that support that industry. And finally, I want to highlight the producer responsibility for packaging passed in Minnesota, and we're really excited about that. We're trying to dig in and make sure there aren't any changes to it. Don't want to go backwards. But yeah, super excited to see that going forward and happy that the legislature acted and that the state is now taking on implementation. But it does take a long time. So I'm not going to share these slides later, but you look at 2025, 26, building the foundation. 27, 28, establishing the structure, stewardship plans, and it isn't until 2029 that implementation actually takes place in earnest, including reimbursement of local governments for the role they play in the system. And then finally by 2032, it's like, wow, by then, yeah, it must be refillable, reusable, recyclable, or compostable. But I should give a nod to this law because it actually does incorporate reuse into it. And with that, that's all I got. Trying to fit in 10 minutes so we have plenty of time for Q&A. And I'll stop sharing there.
Great. Thank you so much. Lots of questions. We're going to hold those. Please put your questions in the chat and we will collect them for the end. And we're going to turn it over to Estee.
Thanks so much. Just brought up my slides that you can see those okay? Okay, awesome. Well, thanks, Ben. So good to hear about what's going on in Minnesota. Very impressed. I will introduce myself and say my name's Estee Segal. I'm a principal planner in the Waste Prevention and Environmental Services Department in Metro in Oregon. And Metro is a regional government, and I'll just put that in context for you a little bit more on the next slide. But just want to say that what I'm talking about today is more on the regional scale level, a little bit different than Minnesota, but really it's so interesting to hear the overlaps and where things are a little bit different. So I work on our regional policy team and was one of the managers that helped to develop the regional system facility plan that now guides our future planned investments in programs and infrastructure, that some of which to really focused on reducing waste and increasing access overall in the region, maintaining affordability specifically within our garbage and recycling system. And I love what Ben, you just said about plans are sort of like policy, and that they are an endorsement of what we plan to do, and they sort of lead to budget allocation and staffing. And that's so true. And that's what we're seeing here a bit of with the adoption of this plan. So I'd like to share just how we are able to prioritize and incorporate several actions in this plan to support the future growth of reuse in our region. Metro is a regional government in Oregon that oversees planning for land use, transportation, parks, and also oversees the region's garbage and recycling system in 3 counties, Clackamas, Washington, and Multnomah counties here. Metro also owns and operates 2 public transfer stations in the Portland metro region. We're guided by a 2030 regional waste plan, which is our solid waste management plan that's done every 10 years. And it centers our work on waste prevention, equity, resilience, shared prosperity in our garbage and recycling system. And so that's the one there on the left. And the regional system facilities plan on the right is a more recently adopted plan by our Metro Council just actually a year ago. Someone reminded me, I think it's almost to the day, it was in March. And it is an accompanying plan to our regional waste plan that defines a specific set of programs and infrastructure investments to realize over the next 20 years. So here are a few more details on what the plan includes. And again, I will highlight a few of the programs and projects that are included in the plan that support and expand the reuse and repair sector specifically, and that over time are expected to really reduce the amount of waste headed to landfill in our region. I would say that involvement and advocacy for reuse and repair organizations and business leaders, as well as other community members who provided input that they want and need more places to recycle materials and places to donate, repair, and or shop for reused and repairable items, really was a big part of how these investments were actually included in the final plan. So just boiling it down, the plan very simply, and the plan is on the website, and I think I included the link there. But there are really 4 main investment areas in the adopted plan, and just wanting to really highlight in these couple minutes, just that reuse and repair was identified and included in the plan as a key strategy for reducing waste and expanding access to the circular economy services across the metro region. We developed the plan in 5 phases with lots of discussions and engagement with strategic partners, including from general community, local governments, industry, and reuse and repair businesses. So we held multiple roundtables, workshops, meetings, advisory committees, as well as we hosted what you're seeing here is an international symposium where we had over 120 partners attend to hear presentations from 4 innovators in the waste management, waste reduction space from Canada, Colorado, New Zealand, and Denmark. That was a really exciting session where we also reviewed sort of the beginnings of the draft of the plan with the community as well. We also invited our Metro counselors to attend the symposium, and most of them did attend to learn and get inspired by these international innovators and to hear directly from attendees about the gaps and needs in the system and really what they felt like should be prioritized in the final plan. We also held meetings and workshops with the reuse and repair organizations in our region to talk about different ways the system facility plan could support and expand their work. You can probably see some familiar faces here. At one of the workshops, reuse and repair partners identified the biggest gaps they faced in growing their impact in the region. And so we summarized and synthesized these into 6 primary areas and determine the things that would be most appropriate to be included in this plan, and also those that might be addressed through other means. So This, you can see here the top 6 were space, transportation, salvage at transfer stations, communications across the sector, staffing capacity, and funding. So we narrowed in on space needs for the plan. Many organizations and businesses really said that they lack enough space to process, clean, and repair items for reuse and or for seasonal or short-term storage of inventory, sorry. And then funding was a big one. The reuse and repair services that organizations and businesses provide are not adequately funded. And in particular, nonprofit organizations that provide services are not being compensated for the waste reduction work that they do and the positive externalities they generate for the region with this work. And so after a lot of research, assessment, and internal engagement with staff and external engagement with the partners I already talked about, the plan incorporated 3 areas of investment to increase support for the reuse and repair sector over the next 20 years and to partner with reuse and repair organizations to plan and operate some of the future facilities. The 3 investments included in the plan related to reuse and repair are the pilot program to support and fund existing nonprofit reuse organizations over a 3-year period. This program launched last year and was the focus of a previous session today with Suzanne. And I'm just going to briefly highlight it again in the next slide in case anyone wasn't able to attend that. Secondly, there's a concept for a reuse warehouse located in a central and accessible part of the region that supports and expands organizations and businesses' capacity to sort, store, and repair items. And third, a concept for a reuse mall, that we were really excited about. From one of our partners coming from Denmark and others across Europe and the US, but really another facility that would ideally be located in a central and accessible part of the region that provides affordable space to showcase and sell used, upcycled, refurbished, and sustainably sourced products to the public. So to be clear, the reuse warehouse and reuse mall are visionary plans for the future. They're included in the plan. There was budget estimates included, but both really will start with feasibility studies to further define the need and the best approach to address operational, structural, programming, location, and then to find additional funding sources. But I think it's really significant that these facilities were included in the plan and have the support of many community members, partners, and our Metro counselors. So again, a little bit more about, again, a repeat of the Reuse Impact Fund, which launched last fall, right? Only a couple months after the plan was adopted. It's the first regional fund of its kind that we know of. It's a multi-year, flexible, operational funding to nonprofit reuse, repair, and share organizations. And it's really a deliberate shift away from project-based grants. It provides $1 million per year in funding through using the regional solid waste system fee, which is a fee charged on every ton of waste that is disposed of in our region, thus making the program resilient to the current federal funding instability. And this year, 16 Portland area nonprofits were funded. They all prioritizing organizations that focus on reuse and repair of textiles, building materials, electronics, appliances, furniture, bikes, and tools. And the fund really centers equity by directing funding into Metro equity focus areas and centers the needs of nonprofit organizations. This is what the organizations identified as a priority during the development of the plan, and Metro is able to issue a request for applications just a couple months after the plan. So another plan investment area that I want to briefly highlight, because it also relates to reuse and repair, is the development of what we were calling community drop-off depots across our region. These are facilities envisioned to be convenient and accessible locations where residents and small businesses can bring a range of materials for reuse, recycling, household hazardous waste, and for self-haul garbage. There are examples of this type of facility across the US and Canada and the world, but they're really a bit unique because they are facilities that would be planned and built to accommodate residents over commercial haulers, bringing wet waste garbage for transfer and processing, like at a typical transfer station. These are envisioned to be built as community assets at the human scale with green spaces, spaces for community education about waste prevention, and community meeting rooms as well. Metro envisions building a network of 6 of these community drop-off depots across the region to improve regional access to services, increasing the amount of people that live within a 20-minute drive to a drop-off facility from what is now about 40% to about 98% when all of these are in place. And modeling shows that the 6 depots will keep more than 30,000 tons of material from ending up in a landfill each year. I wanted to share an early conceptual design for the first depot that Metro is hoping to build in Western Washington County in the city of Cornelius. Metro, we purchased this site. It's actually about a 12-acre site, and it purchased in 2020 within the industrial district of the city of Cornelius. At that time, we thought we were going to build a full-service transfer station, but by doing this planning process to create the system facility plan, we actually realized that the gap is really around household hazardous waste collection in this part of the region, as well as reuse, recycling, repair services in this part of the region. So we changed our concept, and we now have a site that's bigger than we think we need for depots. We envision depots to be anywhere from 4 to 7 acres. And so we're currently studying the site to understand different sizing options, collection of materials, and on either a 5-acre site or a 7-acre site. The concept you see here shows possibly what a 7-acre depot might look like on the site. And the design concept, really, it's trying to incentivize waste reduction through design. There will be a free drop-off area for reuse, recycling, and household hazardous waste materials. And you can see that area is outlined in red here. And then there'll be a paid drop-off area for self-haul garbage and paid recycling. And so we're hoping that this will incentivize people over time with education about how to prepare their loads, separate materials, and really prioritize reuse, recycling, household hazardous waste apart from garbage and paid recycling. The plan is to partner with community-based organizations and existing reuse and repair businesses as we move this from a conceptual idea into really design programming of a future facility, and to work with these folks on the detailed programming and logistics for the portion of the site that will receive reusable and repairable materials. In partnership, we hope to determine how to best collect items, staff these areas, and how to move materials collected from our site to distribute to our reuse and repair nonprofit partners. And just to conclude here, just to sum up, really this plan is a comprehensive regional investment strategy that explicitly includes reuse as a priority alongside recycling and garbage in the planning for new facilities. It positions reuse infrastructure as a regional public good funded through system fees, and includes storage, processing, and public spaces that support reuse and community benefits. Through the plan, we created policy and budget foundation for reuse, which we hope can be a replicable model for how regional governments can embed reuse into policy plans and strategies. And I'd like to reiterate that involvement and advocacy from our reuse and repair organizations and businesses and our community-based partners was critical in getting these important reuse and repair actions included in the final plan. And with that, I am done with my slides.
Great. Thank you so much. Couldn't have planned that better if we'd planned it. Lots of, I love that both of you talked about the kind of progression, right? From vision to plan to policy to funding to physical locations and programs. So that's really great. Please, everybody, put any questions in the chat. I have a couple to start with while you're typing, and one of them I think kind of builds on the comment that just got dropped in there, which is, I know right now there's a lot of state local, it's trickle down budget crunches in a lot of places right now. And a lot of policy can have budget implications. I know a lot of reuse organizations, as you said, their top priority is funding. So if you had to pick one program that you think delivers the most impact, or program or policy or campaign that delivers the most impact for the least amount of funding, what would you suggest? It's like choosing your favorite child, but I'm gonna ask anyway.
Well, I can start and just sort of lean back on that reuse impact fund, that we just launched. And I honestly like that was I think the priority of from the reuse repair community to begin with this plan. And so it's $1 million a year. It's significant, but as Suzanne explained, it was really partitioned out to 16 grantees, and for hopefully a 3-year period. It's based on the yearly budget allocation for Metro, but I do think it seems like already there's just a lot of support and kudos for the way that program was planned and developed, and that it's we heard from Jason too, just that a little bit can go a long way to supporting especially tool libraries. So I'm going to lean on that and just say that for us in this plan, there are a lot of ideas. That one was the top one. And the warehouse and the mall were like lots of community members really support that. There's still questions about how these, like the impact, how that could be accessible and located in a place that's accessible to all, and the impact. So they'll take more feasibility, like I said, but I think that launching some flexible funding program, I think was a good start.
A million is probably not that much in the total, but what's the total budget of the Metro?
Of the plan. The whole budget is about 270 million over 20 years of investment.
Yeah, which is still probably a tiny percentage of what Oregon Metro is of the overall budget, right? So
yes, yeah, that's true.
Ben, did you have one you wanted to highlight?
I like Fix It clinics because it's volunteer relied on, but I also like our deconstruction programs because I think they have a big impact as far as quantity and materials.
Yeah.
On Essie, I have to say, great presentation, by the way, too. It's super excited hearing all those ideas.
Well, thank you. When I saw your slides this morning, I was also impressed. Lots to learn from Minnesota.
Yes. Strong pun game in Minnesota. Or the branding is really, really good over here.
Yes, we need that. We need some help with
minimize.
that.
I was like, oh, that's so good. Yeah. Excellent. So I think one other, question that I have is I think, a lot of policies, obviously you both highlighted that reuse is a portion of an overall waste strategy plan. I'm always interested in the kind of distinction between policies that are good for incentivizing recycling or organics diversion versus policies that are effective for reuse, because obviously you have to get a little bit upstream of the waste for that to be really effective. Do you guys have any examples of policy that you feel like doesn't, works for recycling but doesn't work in reuse, or vice versa?
I have some reactions to that.
Okay,
I can jump in and go first.
Yeah.
And maybe it's frankly a little bit more about struggles. Because I think for us, for the most part, if you look at recycling and organics, things are fairly uniform and standardized and consolidated. And if you look at reuse, it's just, I don't want to say fragmented. It's like a beautiful diversity of reuse. And so I think we've had to adjust a little bit for how we work in that space, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And it makes scaling a little more difficult as well.
Yeah.
And that's more of a general.
Yeah. No, I think that's
maybe a specific one.
That's right on. I think there are some questions. I mean, I think that's where, leaning into repair obviously is often a way to address that diversity, right? Because repair is a form of reuse that can be applied a lot more to more of a diversity of things. Are you both? I think there's some questions in the chat about both incorporating repair stations into your depot potentially, Estee, or about that. I mean, I know you're doing fix-it clinics, Ben, but what do you think are the ways that repair particularly fits into that into your policy plans? Think this,
Yeah. Oh, go
yeah.
ahead.
And jump in if that is clear enough. Otherwise, I'll read the question from the chat.
Well, just to respond to that question about the depots, yes, we definitely have visions of repair fitting in. It kind of depends on the location and what's already there and the organizations that are already working in those areas, whether there needs to be another location, at the depot for repair, or if there's partnerships to be made. And so each one of our depots is going to be in a totally different community. But we want to leverage and learn from what's already working there, and then hopefully create space that the community can use for additional events. I mean, I think it's going to be really, if we do this right, there'll be a lot of materials and infrastructure, just at the depots that will really support repair and tool libraries. So I think we're excited to just get into that programming question and partnerships question, but that definitely came up a lot in our engagement. Repair, and then also people want to be able, we're ask a lot about, well, what can they take items right from there, can they purchase items, and we really don't see that as what will happen at the depot in terms of taking materials off. We want to partner with existing reuse businesses and nonprofits in a way to get the materials back to their sites to either give away, share with communities, or sell. So but all that stuff is coming into the next phase of planning these.
Yeah, I think it was great. You both kind of touch on this, that funding and space are the two challenges to most of these policies, and a lot of governments have space and can provide it for repair fairs, right? That's why that's such, not just the volunteers, but also the space is an easy thing for to have policies around providing government-owned spaces for those kinds of events. And so it's transitioning to how do we get more permanent spaces, right, in the future, so that those things can become more permanent fixtures. But this has been a great presentation and conversations. I want to encourage everybody to hop over to the policy breakout. So that the next there's going to be a couple of different breakout sessions, and policy is one of them. I want to thank you both for presenting. I've just put the link in the chat to get back to the lobby so you can go to the breakout session. I hope to see you guys there, and we can continue this conversation a little bit more, and maybe answer people's more specific questions about what's going on in their areas and policies. Thank you again to Ben and Estee. And I'm so inspired by everything you guys are doing and how clearly you managed to present it. So thank you so much for that. And
Thanks,
I'll see
Phoebe.
you all
Thanks,
over
everyone.
there. Yeah.
Thank you.